ladies that are going to give me shit, and I'm looking forward to it. Please welcome our first panelist of tonight, Nadia Manzoor. Our second panelist tonight is from Lady Parts Justice. Please welcome Sharron Paul. And our final panelist tonight is a pit performer and student who's a badass and says what she means. Please welcome Saritha Vuppala. Ladies, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have you. So, privilege is a sticky topic in a lot of ways, but let's really bust into it as much as we can. What does it mean to you, privilege? Whether it's racial, gender, sexual orientation, what does privilege mean to you, the first thing that pops into your head, Nadia?
Benefit over a group of other people.
Yeah. Sharron?
Just living your life in a way that you don't have to acknowledge that people don't have the same benefits that you do.
Yeah. Saritha?
Advantages that you've not really done anything to earn. You've just been handed them.
That's a really good point. The earning factor, I think, is something that gets lost in the discussion because we don't think about things that are just given to us, especially if they're given to us from birth. It's such a intangible thing to think about, and when people are faced with that, I think that's where, I know at least for me, that's where white fragility first sort of starts to rear its head. Because you're like, I didn't do anything. Okay. You think, I didn't create this situation, so why am I being faced with it, I think is the thing that a lot of people think. So when have you experienced privilege, in the positive sense? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think that's difficult for literally anyone to unpack, because that's the beauty of privilege. You don't have to acknowledge that you're benefiting from something that others might not. Right. I really enjoyed the opening letters from the show tonight, because I'm like, a lot of that helped me think about my own privilege or lack of. Because I think I'm assuming things about us all on stage right now. One that a lot of us don't necessarily acknowledge is ableism.
Right.
Sometimes we take for granted that we have two legs to walk on and get wherever the heck we want to go freely. Literally, as I walked here tonight, I saw an elderly person walking down 24th Street who was essentially bent completely over, just bent at the waist. And I felt terrible, and I'm just like, I'm so lucky that that's not my reality.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily something you think about all the time because you're used to just living your life, and it's just, I've always walked and I've always gotten around easily, and it's never been an issue.
Are you guys okay over there?
We're good.
You got wet butts?
Yeah, wet butt.
Wet butt privilege?
We're privileged.
Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's something when ableism came up in that sketch, which was written by John Terry Gadsden, she's not here tonight. She's in LA reading from her book of poetry like a badass. Right. We love John Terry. When John Terry wrote the thing about ableism, I thought, oh my God, I can't even, there's only stairs to this theater. If people want to see this show, they have to be able to walk down the stairs on two legs. And I hadn't thought about that before, which is an interesting moment to kind of consider.
I actually do think about that a lot, and it's like I'll watch videos, inspirational videos of people, the other day I was watching a video of a woman born without arms, and she's doing everything from cooking to feeding her son to playing sports. I'm like, don't make me feel bad about myself, because I do none of that. I'm like, do I have to lift the remote to change the channel? So I do try to take all that in. I don't do it. It is uncomfortable because I'm like, what did I do to earn all of this? Or people who've been in accident, that's such an unfortunate thing. And I feel lucky every day that nothing like that has happened to me or people I know. I do appreciate all of that. The other thing that I feel I've taken advantage of in life is being educated. We were only middle class, and my father was actually very poor. he educated himself. All of his 7 younger siblings took care of his mother. His dad was an alcoholic, didn't do anything. The only way he went from being piss poor to middle class is through education. And he instilled those values in all of us. And that's how I think I've risen above a lot of everyday problems. If I can complain that, oh, there's dog poop on sidewalk, that's a privilege. I know that.
Yeah.
So education, I think, something we should keep in mind. Not everyone gets that.
Totally.
It's true.
I agree with that. For me, education too. Sorry, and also, I was just thinking, the first time I really saw myself in context of where I had privilege was when my family would go back to Pakistan and we would take Cadbury's chocolate, and all of my cousins would just be staring at me because I was just like eating these bars of chocolate, and they would like have us ship over like chunks and chunks of these big Cadbury's bars, and they would keep them in the freezer so they could have like a piece every night because it was like chocolate. And they didn't have that kind of chocolate.
Yeah.
And I would just, so I remember being so amazed that to them, this chocolate or like my Game Boy was like this sense of like real luxury items, but to me it was something that I took for granted.
Right.
And that was because of, access to the Western world.
Yeah. So you grew up in London, right?
Yeah, I grew up in London.
When did your family go to London?
In the 80s, so when I was about 4 or 5, but we went back to Pakistan all the time, so we would bring our privilege to Pakistan, and I would
Right.
just see that difference between me and the way all of my cousins were being raised,
So you create a lot of art about being a Muslim woman who sort of had one foot in both the Western world and in the Muslim world.
Yeah.
How soon in your life did you feel that tension?
So early on, one of the scenes in my show that just reminded me of this was I'm fairly light-skinned compared to my community, and when I was in school and I went to an all-white girls' school, and when my friend's mother found out that I was Pakistani, she was like, oh. You're not that brown. And that was a comment that I will never forget, but it was seen as like this like sense
compliment.
of and I remember being like, no, I'm not, you're right, can I be your friend? And being conflicted by that fact that I wanted to be accepted, and part of the reason she accepted me was because I wasn't the colour of my my twin brother.
Right.
Which obviously was the problem.
So on the reverse, obviously, so when is the first time, I'll ask sort of specifically, when's the first time you were conscious of the fact that someone, that's a really good example, of someone else's privilege kind of like looking down its nose at you? Like Sharron, do you have an early memory of feeling privilege hit you?
Well, I think it ties into education. And it's such a weird stereotype that a lot of people get when you encounter educators who seem shocked that you're an eloquent person. They're just like, oh my God, you're so well spoken. Like, it is the shock of the century. And it's just like, yeah, I'm in this school with all these other intelligent people. I don't know why you didn't pick up on the likelihood of that.
Very well said. What about you, Saritha?
I think it was when I was 7 or 8, walking on the street with my mother and aunt, and a guy walking past just groped me suddenly and very badly. And that was just one of many, many, many such incidents, and I was very aware of the difference between the genders, especially in a place like India. It's always on the back of your head. Like, if not up in front, it's always there. Sunset after sunset, being out was a cause of worry for my parents. I had to call and say, someone will be dropping me off, don't worry about this. Or coming in a bus, it's just like you accept that you're gonna go through a certain amount of harassment or eve-teasing, or you're lucky if it doesn't turn physical. Like, I used to feel good, oh, you just whistled at me, little clothes are awesome. Like, it was that. So I learned very early on that being a woman, being a girl, I wasn't even a woman, not even close. I'd already gotten to third base. Like, I didn't even know what he was.
Involuntarily.
Yeah. So that, I think, was the biggest clue that, oh, okay, maybe I don't have the same freedom as men do.
Yeah. I think it's interesting from my perspective. I felt very early on a sense of the female side of things, and I think it's interesting what you're saying kind of echoes with me, because I think if you're in a community where there's a lot of homogeny, I think then it becomes about anything different that people can find. So in your case being like a woman, or in my case being a woman, because I grew up in a tiny town in the Canadian Rockies. Like, I always used to, when I got to college, I met my first Jew when I was 19. My friend Ari.
Check your privilege. My first Jew.
Good call. I mean, he was the first Jew I encountered. But point taken and received with much embarrassment. The nice thing about being white is you can see my embarrassment. No, but I mean that's a thing, and this sort of gets us to that next point, which is right now is a moment of, like, obviously in politics in the world, particularly in the United States. There's a real moment right now where I read this beautiful piece of writing in New York Magazine by Rebecca Traister. If you're familiar with her writing, she's amazing. Woo indeed. Called The Death Rattle of the White American Male. Great title. And I think what it is, it's like that group, over any other group, doesn't ever have to empathize with the understanding of experiencing anything close to feeling privilege hit them. You know what I mean? Because they all the check marks of things that you're supposed to have privilege for, they have. So now that they're being faced with it and people are calling them out, that's why there's this violent sort of moment, the Trump protesters, all these people. So what do you guys think this means? Like, what is this cultural moment doing? Like, what does it mean right now? What are we experiencing?
There's a lot of anger because white maleness is the default lens in this country, period. It's what it has been from the beginning, and the fact that there's even a slight shift happening, like we saw maybe like the Tea Party bro out of Obama's initial election, which to me is history repeating itself, and it's like Reconstruction, and that's how the KKK formed. It's just there's a perceived threat of a different group that had previously been oppressed gaining some instance of power, and so they have a literal, visceral, violent reaction of, we have to take this down, this is not okay. And I feel like we're seeing that in a very widespread fashion. And also, some of the Trump supporters and the people at these rallies are younger than we would expect them to be, and I feel like these are people who've only known or only paid attention to a black president in their lifetime, and they've heard the things that their parents and grandparents have said, and that negativity has trickled down. So they feel like there's something to fight for and fight against, as opposed to our culture progressing. And it's tough because it's, like I said, it's the defaultness. They're just used to being the norm, and other people's perspectives being shown and appreciated and shared just feels like a personal attack. And it's almost like it's like a personal sensitivity where it's widespread white fragility that's manifesting itself in a violent way right now.
Right.
Yeah, I think a really good example of like the two kind of ideologies that are, if you were to put them in a boxing match, is like Justin Trudeau and Trump. You know, Justin Trudeau, who's like basically the embodiment of like what it means to be a new age, balanced man who has masculine and feminine traits working really well together. And then there's this like old boys group who's like, no, we still are attached to traditional masculinity, which is about power over as opposed to power with. And they're like, no, I'm not right with it. And like it's essentially like they're so uncomfortable with that change, you know, which is interesting in terms of privilege, because they're being forced to look at privilege in a way that will make them have to own, you know, like Trudeau's doing. He's owning, for example, like, you know, Canada's irresponsible relationship to Indigenous people. And that means having to own and take responsibility for what your privilege has done. And like there are people who don't want to do that. So it does, it leads to aggression and violence, because it's it's not owning your part in culture.
Right, they feel like something's being taken away from them as opposed to something being given to other people. Right. And by given, I'm using that very loosely. Very loosely. Where people are being acknowledged as people for once.
There is one subsect of that group though that I actually sympathize with. Trump is very popular among people, white males with a high school degree or less, and obviously they're going to end up poor, not having jobs, not knowing their place in society, and I agree that the right outlet is not to go and bash a minority or women or whatever, but there is a real problem there. And they suddenly feel like they're being heard. Trump is not the guy who's hearing you, but they just want to know that someone out there knows what they're feeling. It's just coming out in really bad ways, and ways that are very bad for the country and even for themselves. But I do acknowledge that there is a problem there. Yeah. It's not all about, oh, we're privileged and no one else should take this from us. They're actually not being given the benefits that they thought they would get.
Right.
And some of it is not even, oh, you're white, you should get this. You're a male, you should get this. It's basic. Like, get a decent education, get a decent job. It's something that they're entitled to, and they're not being given that. And just that subset, I actually sympathize with.
Yeah.
Not with how they're showing it, but their lives, what they're going through, and that's why when I compare myself with them, the people who can't even think for themselves and who don't understand that Trump is being condescending when he says, I love the poorly educated, he's not being on your side.
Yeah. On the head. Dumb poor people, you're adorable.
Yeah, he's using a form of lack of privilege for himself, right? Because he's using economic insecurity of people to then use that group to kind of become misogynistic.
Exactly.
And so it's like putting privilege against another group that's being privileged. It's like
and they don't recognize that, and I feel bad for them that they don't have enough thinking power to even get that.
Mm-hmm.
That what we can see so clearly is not clear to them, and there's something lacking in the education system if that's where things stand.
Also, mob mentality it's very simple for it to take over.
Yeah, the lizard brain part that we all have, that a lot of us learn how to temper, really takes over when you don't, like you say, when you don't get the education, you don't learn how to reason your way through something.
And you perceive a threat.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, like even saying that in the moment, I'm like, part of my brain goes, I don't have the right to tell them how to think or how to be smarter or get a better education. Like that itself is a form of privilege. That's where this becomes very complex. And so that's why I'd like to talk a little bit about white fragility now, because I think I experience it daily, like multiple times a day. I'm experiencing it right now. Because there is a core part of me, and I think every white person who means well, but like, what the fuck does means well mean? That doesn't do anything, but just bear with me for a second. Every white person who's trying to learn and to be an active ally and to be a part of the conversation while sitting back, but listening, but still wanting to like dig in there and understand. And I understand by talking and asking questions. And then sometimes I feel like people are like, don't ask me, go learn. And I'm like, this is how I learn. And I feel like there's an interesting push and pull that happens in this right now. And then I start to feel guilty because at the core of it is a part of me that goes, like I grew up in Canada, so that itself is a form of privilege. When you talk about Trudeau, boy, am I clinging to that passport right now. I'll tell you that right now. There's a part of me that goes, the first time someone brought it up to me, I remember thinking like, but I didn't do that. Like when they're like, all of these, Canada has, like you said, there's been thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women that nothing has been done about until now. Trudeau's handling that. We had Japanese internment camps in Canada. It's not the beautiful, sunshiny place you think it is. There's a lot going on there. But I remember when we first started to learn about that, and people, people of color around me were like, this is terrible. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I didn't do it. So I think that's sort of the beginning of white fragility, is like, it wasn't me personally. And so then there's a hard leap, I think, for a lot of us from, I didn't do it, to, but I recognize that it's part of the history of the people that I come from. You know what I mean? So what do I do about that? asking them what to do. Is kind of again, I recognize the irony of that statement, but
I mean, it's both tougher and easier said than done.
Right.
Because I understand, like, when you ask people, what should I do? I didn't do it. Tell me.
Yeah.
The people that you're asking have probably been asked that so many times.
Right.
And they're literally exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know what? Someone wrote a book about this. I didn't. But I assure you someone did. Go learn about it. Your Google works just as well as mine does. But it's tough, and it's just like, yeah, you definitely want to engage with people and make that personal connection and hope to make a difference. But sometimes you're just so damn tired.
Yeah.
And it's rough. And like, I've been through this personally where people are just like, explain. And I'm just like, I've been explaining for years.
Yeah.
It's just like, I wish I could just push play.
Right.
And have you understand some things.
Yeah.
But it might even just be a matter of trial and error. If you're gonna ask people, keep asking until you reach that person who's not exhausted and someone gives you
Right, and I think I get that too, because from a female, like from a feminist perspective, from the moment you say, well, I'm a feminist, and the moment you start running, I don't know, like a feminist talk show at a comedy theater, people start to talk to you about that, and a lot of dudes on Facebook jump on conversations and tell you what they think the conversation is, and it's fucking exhausting. So I can only imagine how that sort of blossoms outward when you're a woman and a person of color, and I just feel like I can't, like, I'm exhausted all the time, just being a woman in this world, so I can't imagine. So I'll read some books, and I'm sorry I asked. Don't pity me, that makes it worse. Yeah, and I mean, any other thoughts on that?
She's right in that it can get a little exhausting it comes from a very good place, but I'd rather be your second brown friend than your first. I'd rather someone break you in.
You want to be my first brown friend?
I know.
We'll be your first one.
I'd rather someone else break you in and then you get used to everything, and then you're not like, oh, you're Indian. Do you walk like that? Do you eat? Is this offensive to you? Which comes from a great place, but maybe I'm just here to watch a show or something.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm different when I maybe don't want to feel that way.
Right.
Sorry.
No, please. No, this is great. What did you say?
So would you prefer somebody ignores it then? Like a new
It's,
friend that you meet at the theater when you're just trying to...
It's not, well, if you're aware of it, then you might as well get it out, but I don't always think that when someone meets me that they think, oh, she's Indian and she's a woman. Then sometimes you're just connecting on something else, and that's absolutely fine. If you, obviously, like if you have questions about it, if you're going to India and you're wondering what the right thing to do is, whatever, yeah. Alright. I'm happy to be your source. I'm happy to be your brown friend. All I'm saying is that I prefer not to be seen just as your brown friend or something.
Right.
Because there's so much more that all of us have to offer than being, a certain category of
being the resource.
the resource.
The resource, yeah. Capital T, the resource. So, I think you brought it up earlier, Sharron, that there's like an idea of, in order for there to be, that like white people have to give something up, or they perceive they have to give something up in order to have equality. And I think that that's true. And I think that that's okay.
Right.
So why do you guys think that, like, what's it gonna take for us, but mostly white males, let's be honest, to just be like, I get it, I have to give something up. Or like, give something up is like a weird phrase, but you know what I mean? Like, to take that extra step is really what I consider it to be. Like, to be sitting in a room, I mean, I work in the entertainment industry, as I think we all sort of do, and probably many of you here, and I always have the thought and the conversation with people about, like, the rooms that these decisions are being made about what gets made are still mostly white men, and they don't think that extra step a lot of the time. They just go, make a show. And this person's my friend, and this person's my friend, and this person's my friend, and then those people hire their friends, and that's why it's all fucking white dudes doing everything. Because that's who people tend to be friends with. And it's only now that they're really starting to pay attention to that. So to me, that's the extra step. So why do you think it's so hard for that extra step to happen, and what is it going to take for people to take it?
Although I think that it is really important for there to be a switch of accessibility to non-white males and everything, I actually think it's more of a fundamental switch that is preventing white men to even kind of embrace that, because it's still coming from a place of otherhood, which is that white men have to allow others to get so that they have to give up. And I actually still think that's very divisive thinking.
Right.
And I think one of the fundamental shifts that has to happen is that we're actually all in it together. And so what's going to benefit black men and black women is going to benefit white men. Rather than it being seen as like you're gaining something that I have to give up, it's actually a gain for all of us.
Right.
And that diversity actually helps humanity. And I think that's a fundamental shift that actually has to happen first.
Well said. What do you guys think?
Yeah, like Nadia said, it's not a zero-sum game.
Right.
And but it also has to come from us. I'm guilty of, like, early on, not now, I'm a better person now, but early on when I started following comedy, which was about 15 years ago, I loved stand-up. I would go watch shows, I would watch specials. Even I was thinking, men are funnier than women. Yeah, she's a woman comedian, but there's an Indian comedian. Yeah, but he's not that funny. It's like, first of all, we should get rid of our prejudices. And it doesn't mean that I now start to say women are funnier than men.
Right.
It's just that, okay, watch this woman comedian, see how she's doing, watch that guy, and judge them separately, like on their own merits, whatever. So it also has to start with people supporting one another. If you're a minority, don't think that there's room just for one woman on a certain thing. Like if you're a writer, don't think there's room for just one woman or one person of color or whatever, and fight to get that again over someone else. Like, understand that there is room for more.
Yeah. And
together you're gonna win. And then the same thing even from a white male side. There isn't just like we're not all gonna storm in and kick you out. Like that's not gonna happen.
Speak for yourself.
It's so funny.
I was just gonna say, Sharron, what does it take? Like, what is it gonna take?
I'm glad
Revolution?
it's time for a revolution, guys. But you acknowledge it. That's what I was saying before. As a society, the cultural conditioning of white maleness being the default. It wasn't necessarily when you got into stand-up comedy and you were watching plenty of white males. Now you found them funny, but did they necessarily speak to your own experience? Was any of their material relatable to you in a way?
Yeah.
Exactly. We're used to just being bombarded by images and perspective of white maleness, no matter what, to the point where we're just like by default, that's what's good, that's what's entertaining, that's what's normal. And like you said, if it's a bunch of white dudes in a writer's room, they're gonna keep hiring their pals. And there was a recent study that said 70% of white Americans don't have any friends of color. So we forget that America as a whole is vast, and it's not
New York.
New York City is not a microcosm of America on the whole. It'll take a revolution. We might have to just go bust down some doors and go, guys, it's not just you, there are other people at this party, and we're all going to benefit from us sharing and commingling and showing different perspectives off, because again, that helps make others the norm as opposed to being others. Like being othered for generations is not beneficial to anyone. You feel like an outsider in your own home, and there's nothing okay about that.
Yeah. Couldn't have put it better myself, and wouldn't, because it's not my thing to say. Thank you guys so much. Nadia, Manzoor, Sharron, these are all wonderful human beings and women who do wonderful things in the comedy world. after released into
Nice
the
try.
wild,